From In the Beginning to the Musical Apocalypse, this is The Bible Says What. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. One of my guilty pleasures is a show called The Bible Explained podcast. It's a Christian lady reading the Bible and trying to explain what she's just read. Spoiler alert, she's always got an excuse for her deity's behavior. The verse below is from a recent show she did, and I thought I would share my thoughts on it. So here we go. The names and locations mentioned here may sound like I've changed them to protect the innocent, but it's just my ignorance and inabilities. Acts 16, verse 1. Paul came to Derbe and then to Lystra, where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer, but whose father was a Greek. It doesn't say whether his father was a believer, just his mother, meaning his father was probably some sort of heathen, explaining why later on we find out that Timothy did not have part of his genitals cut off as a baby. Verse 2. The believers of Lystra and Iconium spoke well of him. Paul wanted to take him along the journey, so he circumcised him, because of the Jews who lived in that area, for they all knew that his father was a Greek. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would Timothy agree to such a thing? To make it worse, he did this not for religious purposes, but because Paul needed him to blend in better with the Jewish communities they were heading to. My next question: are these nudist communities? Did they have some sort of circumcision checkpoint? Seems like something you could just hide under your robe. If cutting off parts of your genitals is the price for the trip, cancel my reservation. Skipping to verse 6, Paul and his circumcised companions traveled throughout the region to Phrygia and Galatia, having been kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word in the province of Asia. When they came to the border of Mysia, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Holy Ghost would not allow them to. If God is stopping someone from going somewhere, whether by summoning his ghost, manipulating weather patterns, or planting thoughts, that's called interference. And interference is kind of the opposite of free will. Also, if he can micromanage where his message goes, why has he failed to micromanage what his actual message is? How many different flavors of Christianity are there now? Or how about intervening when he's actually needed? The slaughtering of his favorite people would have been a good time to stop someone from going somewhere. Acts 16, proving once again that Christians worship a monster and that their free will argument contradicts their holy book. Let's start the show.
Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with? Okay, so it took you reading the Bible to realize that those things were bad for you?
Yeah, it actually did. I
Couldn't figure this out on your own?
No, Ted Bundy could be redeemed. God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Yahweh sets up a whole system in the Old Testament where you slaughter animals just so he's able to forgive you.
Today's special guest is coach, podcaster, and Bible teacher James Early. Welcome to the show, James.
Hey, thanks, Michael. It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you tell the folks at home a little bit about what you do?
Well, thank you, Michael. I do lots of things. Mostly now my focus is on sharing the ideas in the Bible, more not so much a theological. I'm not a theological debate person. I'm trying to get down to the practical message of what does it mean to love your neighbors yourself? What does it mean? Jesus says, love your enemies. That's a tough one. You know, how do you actually do that? What does it mean to forgive someone? How to put these practical ideas into our practice in our daily lives. So that's what I help people do. I have a podcast called The Bible Speaks to You. And I also, speak on the Bible to groups and churches. I do workshops, lots of different Bible topics. One thing I've been doing since 2008 is every week I go out to the Danbury, Connecticut Federal Correctional Institution, and I do a Bible study out there pretty non-denominational. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. We're just reading Bible stories and saying,
Huh.
how do these stories apply to our lives? What can you take and apply to your life? And a lot of people have really found it helpful because I'm not trying to tell them what to think. I'm helping them think for themselves.
Hmm.
So that's another thing I do. And then I am, as you mentioned, I'm a coach. I have a program called Jesus Mindset Coaching, and it's all about how to think like Jesus, how to love like he did. You know,
Hmm.
maybe I don't know, you've got a very interesting listenership, I think, Michael.
Hmm.
So maybe some of them don't believe in Jesus. That's fine. But for those who might, it's like, I think he loved in a way that most people don't know how to love. And so I'm trying to figure that out for myself and help other people figure out what does it mean to love that way so that you can help people.
Interesting. Thank you for that. There's a lot there. A lot there. Man, I want to touch on the last thing a little bit though. Loved how most don't know how to love. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Oh, well, I mean, just look at most people you meet in your daily lives. I mean, what is love? We have so many different definitions of love.
Hmm.
Actually, the Greeks had 3 or 4 or 5 different words for love, and we put
Hmm.
them all in one word. You know, they had eros, which meant like a sexual love between a husband and a wife. They had filio, which was like brotherly love.
Uh-huh.
There's agape, which is like a more spiritual love. There's there's several others. I'm not a Greek scholar,
How
but
are you
you know,
using it though? How are you
well, when
using
I say
it?
love, uh, I use it lots of ways. Like, oh, I love the
In this
sun on the
instance, though, when you
flowers.
said that,
And this, okay, to
loved,
love
yeah,
like Jesus.
yeah.
Okay, so to me, it is loving on a deeper level of
Hmm.
on like at the core of who someone is as an individual.
Hmm.
I tend to see people as a child of God. And so I'm trying to love them not on the surface of, you know, whether they dress like I do or think like I do or vote in the same political party as I do or go to
Hmm.
the same church as I do. If I can love everyone just as like my brother or sister in the great family of the universe, which I would say is, you know, as children of God, if I can love someone on that deep core level as their deep core identity, there's a connection there. And it's like I'm not judgmental
Hmm.
of the mistakes they've made or the choices they've made. It's
Hmm.
like I'm just loving them as a
So
person.
you're thinking more unconditional. Is that kind of where
Yeah,
you're?
yeah. And I mean, it's hard to put in words, but that's a pretty good word for it. And I would say also omniconditional, not, you
Hmm.
know,
What do you mean, omni?
and it's kind of mean, well, omni means all, you know, like every conditional. It's kind of the
Yeah, but what do
same
you mean
thing
by that?
as,
What do you mean by that? By every conditional versus
well,
unconditional?
you know, it's easy to love someone when you agree with them. It's easy to
Hmm.
love someone, well, you know, it's harder to love someone that you totally disagree with. I mean, I don't say somebody I
Hmm.
disagree with on a theological point or a religious point or whatever it is. That's not the part I'm trying to love. I'm trying to love them just as an individual,
Hmm.
and respect them as an
As a
individual
human being.
who, yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And
I
I would
gotcha.
take
Yeah.
it on a deeper level. I would say in a deeper spiritual sense. But yeah, that's basically it.
What does that
The
mean?
love and
But so
what does what mean?
I get the person. We can love the person as a physical sense. It's when we go beyond that, the spiritual sense. What do you mean by loving them in the spiritual sense?
Well, usually, you know, how do you see yourself, Michael? Do you look in the mirror and you see a guy with a
Hmm.
beard,
Yeah.
blue eyes, you know,
Yeah.
so old, so tall,
Oh, thanks,
what
man.
color? Yeah, all that stuff, you know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, think of how we usually identify ourselves. But
Physically, yes. I can
what if you
physically describe
right,
myself.
but what if you took away all those physical characteristics and you were just thinking about the mental or
Personality,
non yeah, the non-material aspects of who you are, like your character,
my
your
character, my personality. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So
I can understand that.
that's what I'm talking about when I say spiritual. I'm talking about the non-material
Hmm.
aspects of, your integrity, your
But how do you change that from a normal characteristic of somebody to now this is a spiritual characteristic of somebody? Can we just
well, I
call
don't.
it a characteristic? Do we have to add the
Yeah,
word spiritual?
we don't have to. I mean, you can
Yeah.
use whatever language you want to.
I'm just
We
curious why
use
we
this.
add the word spiritual to it when it's just a regular
Well,
characteristic.
uh, I don't know. That's a good question. Different people use the same words
Hmm.
to say the same thing and the
Yeah,
same words to say different things.
gotcha.
And, what does the word spiritual mean to you?
It doesn't really mean anything. I'm very confused by it. It's a spirit world. It's a world I can't interact with, ghosts and whatnot. It's a fantasy world to me,
Okay,
like
well, so
magic and whatnot. But
okay, well, so is there? See, this is just a definition of terms, really.
I love it. Yeah,
Is
no,
there
I want to
some?
define that world. What is it,
Okay,
that
okay.
world to
Well,
you?
I don't know.
Because to me,
I
it's
don't
just
know that
fantasy
I can.
world. I don't understand
No,
it.
yeah, I hear you. I hear. So, is there someone that you love
Yes.
in your life? Okay. Is it okay? There may be a physical attraction, say, to a spouse or something, but what
Hmm.
about just a really good friend that you love them, you appreciate them, you have a deep respect, and you value them? Is there
Yes.
somebody like that? Okay.
Oh yeah, we've
So
all got those
that's not a physical love. It's more of I would see, in my,
characteristic. I enjoy their characteristics. They're a good person. So again, we can
okay.
add the characteristics. I don't need their spirit part of it. That's the weird part to
So,
me. Is I don't
okay.
understand.
So then don't use that word. Then
But
don't
like,
use that
where does
word.
that fit in? Why do we need that word? It doesn't add up for me. Help me understand, James. Why do we use the word
Um,
spiritual when we could just use characteristic and there's no fantasy involved in it?
if I were talking to someone like you, I would probably use those words.
Hmm.
Someone who that word is important to, I might use that word.
Hmm.
To me, it's not so much the word you're using as the essence of what you're saying. And
Gotcha.
if I go to France, I speak French, I'm going to speak French to the people there. Maybe not very good French, but I try to communicate with someone in their language.
Hmm.
So, if you and I were just having a conversation off air and talking about stuff, I
Right.
probably wouldn't use that word very
Hmm.
much.
Hmm. So, but
It's to me
why
is
does James, like in your normal life, to yourself, why would you see these characteristics as spiritual versus just natural characteristics that people have?
why wouldn't you see them as these characteristics as spiritual? Because you
Well,
don't
I
know
don't
that what
understand
the
the
word.
word spiritual. What is it? What is the word
Okay,
spiritual? What is spiritual?
well, technically, it's something that's not material.
Interesting.
Something's not
So
physical. Can you see
the wind.
love with your
Oh.
eyes?
No, but it's a feeling. Those are feelings.
Oh,
Those
okay. So, but
uh,
where did those feelings come from?
my brain, my thoughts.
Okay, then then you're saying really love is just a result of a physical activity in your brain.
Correct. I don't understand what
Okay.
else would it be though. Like I don't
Um,
know, James, help me understand.
well, see,
What else would it be?
actually, I could say it that would make sense to me, and if if you don't, if it's not in your vocabulary, or it
Well, help me
wouldn't make
understand the word
sense to
that
you.
you understand. You understand the word spiritual. And I understand the word natural occurrences in my brain. So how do we get from natural occurrences in our brain to spiritual? How do help me understand?
Okay, I do not believe that love is something that when I say the word love, I'm not
Hmm.
talking about something that starts with a brain wave or a activity in the brain.
Oh, oh, okay.
Okay, so to me there is um, a power, a source bigger than me that I
Hmm.
call God. Some people call it the universe. Some people call it whatever.
Yeah.
We all have different. We're trying to use words to describe things,
Hmm.
and I think sometimes we take the words so seriously we forget the essence of what we're really talking about.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. I
so
think
to,
sometimes we overuse a word and forget what it means.
That's another aspect of what I'm trying to
Hmm.
say is that, I mean, you could just say any word so many times you wonder, what does that even mean? Like the word
Oh, all the
Kleenex.
time. Yeah, I
I
know.
mean, it's like Kleenex, what
That's a
does that
good
mean?
one. Oh
You
man.
know? And so,
Nice job.
so I think sometimes you need to stop and think about, well, what am I really saying by that? So the fact that you're
Yes.
asking me this, because see, in my mind, I think, oh yeah, I know what that means.
Yeah.
So to take a moment and say, what does it something to me to be spiritual? To me, it's, as I said, it's something that's not physical. It's something you
Hmm.
can't see with or perceive with the five material senses.
Hmm.
Um,
Does
I
that count
bel
microscopes though?
No, because that's still, you're actually seeing
Okay.
physical
All right.
things.
Right.
So technically, I guess you could see the wind if you could catch the little molecules of air
Yeah.
blowing through the wind.
Yeah. Well,
But
not the wind
that's
itself, but
getting,
the results of the wind. You could see.
well, but
Yeah,
the
all the
wind is
molecules. Yeah.
technically molecules of
Nice.
air
Oh, nice
moving.
job. Nice job. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you're right. That's a metaphor.
But we can see our brains moving. We can see electrons firing. We can see neurons and all the shenanigans happening inside of our
Right.
brain when we
And
stimulate it to different things.
what if it's actually not the brain that's the cause of that? What if something else is causing the brain to do that?
Oh,
What
there
if
we
it
go,
what
James.
if what if something which I'll call love in
Okay.
this bigger sense of love, what if
Love,
that's causing
love,
us to respond in a certain way?
love.
Uh,
And what is bringing this bigger sense of love to our brains?
well, that's kind of an open-ended question. Um, that's a really good question. Um, I'm not really quite sure where to jump on that merry-go-round. You want to rephrase that for me because that could mean
That's good.
like
That's good. Yeah.
that could mean like five different things, and I'm not sure
Is
what
it
you're really
God that
asking.
brings the love into our brains? That spiritual sense, is that spiritual part God? God, because we can't test him in a lab. We can't sense him with our five senses.
Um, I would say yes. Let me give you an example of a little
Hmm.
bit of what I'm talking about.
Please do.
And this is a simple little example of something that was from outside of me. I was I took my young daughter, she was like 2.5. We went to swim classes at the YMCA.
Uh-huh.
Then we went to Costco, to load
Uh-huh.
up on stuff. And I got back to the car and the car was locked. This was many years ago in the days where you could, lock your car with the key in it. Well, the car was locked. The key was not in the car. I retraced my steps, couldn't find the key anywhere. My
Hmm.
daughter was, ready for her bottle, ready for her nap. My wife had the other set of keys to the car in New York City. I was in Connecticut. That was before cell phones. It's like I started to panic, like, oh my gosh, if I called the locksmith, I could get in the car, but I didn't have the key, couldn't have gone
Yeah.
home. I could
Yeah.
have called a taxi, but I didn't have the keys to get in the house. And she wouldn't be home till like 5 o'clock that night. So
Hmm.
I started to panic, and I'm using the language I used at the time. I said, God,
Hmm.
what can I do? What do I do next?
Hmm.
Because all these scenarios are going through my head, and I heard not an audible voice. The thought came to me: go to the end of your car, walk 3 cars, and turn right. And there were my keys on the parking lot floor,
Why do you think that happened, James?
because I I needed help, and
Because you needed help.
I needed help. I knew I tried everything I could think of.
Hmm.
And when I gave up trying to solve the problem myself, I turned to the being I call
Hmm.
God or love
Hmm.
and asked a question, and I got an answer.
James, I hear this a lot, and the car keys one is just, please don't take offense, but to me, it's like one of the most horrible, disgusting examples, because what happens is God has helped you find your car keys while children are being assaulted in church and crying out his name. That's why I find it so just egregious to me, is the finding your car keys thing. So yeah, great, you found
So
your car
so
keys.
so
I mean,
well
I hit some green
because
lights on the way home, but I'm not gonna, attribute that to an almighty God who watches children get assaulted and doesn't stop them.
Okay, so, you know, I can see why you might say that, but does that
Yeah.
mean I shouldn't ask for help just because somebody else is suffering? How
I
about
just
if I
think it's
ask,
interesting. Why would God find your car keys, but let these horrible things happen?
I think we're the ones that let those things happen. Uh,
So why would
the
an all-powerful God not step in
uh,
and stop these things
may
from happening, or discourage
that's
the
a good
kid from
question.
going into the
Let
building? Say, hey, look over here,
you
there's
know,
some free candy. Anything besides going in there and being assaulted in the house of God. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
no,
Sorry.
those things are totally egregious, as you say, and
Hmm.
they are terrible. I'm not condoning or ignoring
No,
that
yeah,
at
no,
all.
yeah.
But no, I have to ask myself, what can I do? What 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 can I do to help? I can't go and solve every problem like that in
You
the
can't, but
universe.
God can. The God
Okay,
that
hold
you say is
hold
love
on
can. Yeah,
hold on a second. Hold on a
yeah.
second. The sunshine can be shining everywhere, but if you have your um, curtains shut, the light won't come in the room. The sunlight
What does
won't
that
come in
mean?
the room.
What do you mean by
Well,
that?
just out of let's talk about before I turn it into a metaphor.
Yeah,
If you're in your room
yeah.
and the curtains and the shades are pulled and the
Hmm.
sun is out and you have all that closed off, is the sunlight going to come in the room?
No, nope. I got curtains here. We're good. Yeah, sunlight's
Oh,
not coming in.
okay. All
Yeah.
right. So why is that sun? That sun is shining everywhere.
This
Why
is
doesn't it
God's
come in
house,
that
though,
room?
James. These are
Hold
Christians.
on.
These are people that love God, James.
They may or may not love God. They may or may not.
James. I don't like where this is going.
Do
We're
you
going to
believe
change
that
this.
do you believe that everyone who says they're a Christian is following
I,
Jesus
I,
perfectly? I
I don't
don't.
even know what that means,
It's
James. I don't even know what that
well,
means. What does it mean to
um,
follow Jesus perfectly? Let's do that. Let's sideswipe before, because I'm getting upset here. What
I
what does it mean to follow Jesus perfectly?
I don't think anybody follows Jesus perfectly.
What does that mean, though,
Uh,
to follow him perfectly?
well, okay. What does it mean to follow anybody? Let's
Well,
say,
I don't know. It depends on the follow. I could follow my wife down the hallway. I could
okay,
follow people online. I could follow a
okay,
political figure. I mean, there's lots of different
uh,
follows. What kind of follow are we
okay.
talking about here?
So you can follow somebody blindly without ever asking questions,
Hmm.
without thinking for
Yes.
yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. You could follow someone just because everybody else is doing it.
Yeah. Well.
You could follow someone because, oh, let's see, you liked what they said and it made
Hmm.
sense to you. You could follow their example and try and, you could follow the teachings of
Okay.
a philosopher and say, oh, I'm going to try to follow the Stoic philosophy, or I could follow I'm going to follow the
Yeah.
teachings of some whoever. So
Fellowship of the Ring.
there,
Following the ring. Oh, no,
yeah,
sorry.
you
Right. Yeah.
can,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, there's all that word can mean lots of things. So when I say follow Jesus, I don't mean just blindly follow this guy and say, oh, well, that's Jesus, blah, blah, blah. I'm saying, what did he actually teach? Not what the
Hmm.
people in church are saying about him,
Right. What does the Bible
but
say?
and that you could say even as a suspect, we have something that's written down 300 or 400 years after he was here. We don't know 100% if it's accurate or not, but
Hmm.
that's what we've got. Uh, let's,
Hmm.
if you want to
So how do you
assume,
know? Sorry. I mean, do you?
okay,
I
so
just want to
I'll put it
backtrack a
this
little
way.
bit here.
How do I
Yeah.
know? How do I know?
Which parts are true? Which parts aren't? Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious.
I try, I don't personally.
Hmm.
I try to take, back to this idea of follow, let's say, um, maybe your listeners, maybe you're familiar with what is called the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
yeah, okay. So Jesus says some pretty bold things in there.
Hmm.
He talks about loving your enemies, being a
Hmm.
peacemaker, uh, you know, those sense of things. So when I say follow Jesus, I mean take his teachings and try to follow them in your life, put them into practice. And I have found that when I do that,
Hmm.
there are results. It's not a hit or miss thing. It's like when I add two and two and get four,
Which
when I have,
teachings are we talking about?
okay,
Is it
for
all of the
example,
teachings, or is it just
for
some of the
example,
teachings? Yeah.
I'm talking, I'm talking about, let's just take one at a time. Let's talk
Yeah.
about love your uh
Love your neighbor.
neighbor, love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
That's a
Now,
really
is this a
powerful.
that is amazing. Yes, I am
Well, what?
100% for that, James. Yeah. But has
Okay.
God followed that throughout his whole history? Is that a lesson that God has taught his people from beginning to end? Or has he told his people to slaughter their enemies or their neighbors, to get their slaves from their neighbors? I
I
mean,
love
so if
this. I
Jesus
love this
is,
question. No,
I love it.
no,
If Jesus
no.
is God and God is Jesus, then they have the same ideas, then the same person. So that God's ideas of destroying your neighbors and getting your slaves from your neighbors in the Old Testament is the same idea that Jesus has, but for some reason we have two different ideas and two different mindsets. You have Jesus'
Do
mindset and you have Yahweh's mindset. Go
do
ahead,
you
sorry.
believe that Jesus? You don't believe that Jesus is God, do you?
I do
Or do
not.
you?
I do
I
not.
don't either. I don't either. I believe he's the Son of God,
Okay.
but I do not accept the traditional Christian um,
I don't believe he's the
teaching or
son of God
doctrine.
either. But
Well,
that's beside the point.
fine.
Yeah, yeah.
That's fine. You're
So
entitled. I don't care what.
why do you not believe that?
Well, because I don't believe the Bible itself testifies to that. I think it's a
Interesting.
man-made doctrine. The man-made doctrine that was created at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD.
Love it.
It
Love it.
was, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No,
Read,
that's
read that.
awesome.
Do you know that?
I don't
Do you,
usually get this conversation, so this is
do
fun.
you
This is
know?
fun.
Do you know the history of the Council of Nicaea?
A little bit, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's been a
Okay,
minute, but
so
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Okay, well, there were these two camps that
Mm,
Jesus is God and
mm,
Jesus is the Son of God,
mm,
and there were variations of that, and they were arguing tooth and nail. They were
mm.
bitter enemies. They were not acting, from my perspective, not that I'm
Yeah,
the authority,
yeah,
they
yeah.
were not acting at all like the Jesus that I'm
Jesus.
trying to
That you're, yeah,
follow.
yeah. So
They
how
were
do you
acting through,
reconcile the two then? How do you
okay,
reconcile the two
so
between the
just,
Father and the Son's ideas?
well, here's the thing.
Hmm,
If you believe the Bible is the actual literal word of God, literally,
mhm.
then
Which
you have
you
some
don't.
hard, I
Yeah.
don't. Okay, because you have some hard reconciling because here's
Mm,
the God of the universe who says kill all these people.
mhm,
Uh, Let me ask you a question, Michael. Have
mhm.
you ever been in an office building somewhere where there was a wall of glass bricks?
Oh yeah. Oh, I love those. Those are fun.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, aren't they cool? Now, sometimes they're just glass and you can sort of see better.
Mm,
Sometimes they're warped in all these
hmm.
patterns, and if somebody's on the other side, you can just barely see the color shirt they have on, right?
Sometimes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, but you can't. Sometimes you wouldn't even recognize your own best friend behind a wall of glass bricks.
Maybe it's pushing it, but go ahead. But go ahead.
Okay, well, it depends on how much it, how much
Distorts and yeah,
the
yeah, 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 yeah.
distortion. Okay,
There's a lot of
so
ifs there,
okay,
but I'll go with you. I'll go
there's a
with you.
lot of this, but you know what I'm talking about. Uh, I don't believe that God changed. I think what has changed over centuries, millennia,
Hmm.
is that people were looking through God, at God, through a wall of glass bricks, so to speak. They
Oh,
saw
okay.
something. They saw something. They wrote down what they saw and they heard, but it came through filters. It came through distortions. And they
Gotcha.
said, God said this, and it's not congruent. And if you trace in the
Hmm.
history of the Old Testament, there are times when, for example, I don't know how well I know you don't believe all this stuff. I don't know how well you know the stories, but
Hmm.
there's an
Pretty well.
account anyway, a story of, let me think, I think it is Elisha the prophet and um, the king
The
of
she bears?
Syria.
Oh, no. Sorry,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
no, not that one. The king of Syria comes
Hmm.
to capture Elisha, and he's surrounded by all these chariots and horsemen and soldiers.
Hmm.
And so um, his servant goes out and says, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do?" And Elisha prays for him to open, for his eyes to be open. He sees then sort of an angelic host. Now, you probably don't believe all that stuff, but what happens is, now this gets interesting, but
Hmm.
Elisha, instead of killing them, he prays that they will be blind, and he takes them to the king of Syria, and the king of Syria says, "Oh, should I kill them?" He said, "No, don't kill them. Feed them and send them home." He's not killing the enemies. He restores their sight. He sends them home with food, and there's peace for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, whatever it is. There's another time when, well, think of Jonah. There's
Jonah.
a story of
Good one.
Jonah where he goes and preaches to a city that doesn't believe in God, that has persecuted the children of Israel, and God doesn't wipe them out. Why
But are those
why did
real
God
stories
not wipe
versus the other ones?
Okay, so what if they're just metaphors? What if they are?
So we'll go with metaphor.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I didn't write
what
the
about
story.
the New Testament?
I don't know.
Is there how do you distinguish the truth in the New Testament then?
Well, for me, I try to look through the lens of what Jesus said and did.
Those few things he said and did. Because he said some things that weren't always awesome.
Like what?
Well, at the end of time, he's going to come back with his angry angel army, and
well, that's
the people
that's an imposition of man-made doctrines on what Jesus said. Actually,
how do you mean? Go ahead.
Okay, so there's that place in Matthew chapter 25, I think, where it talks about Jesus separating the sheep from the goats.
Yeah.
And it says that the good people, the people who were obedient, did everything they were supposed to, helping the poor and all that stuff, visiting people in prisons, they're going to sit on the right hand of the throne, and the goats are going to go to the left, and they're going to go to eternal damnation. Not eternal damnation. Let's see, what is it? Eternal punishment.
Punishment, yeah. Now, which still isn't the great. Yeah.
Okay, no, it's not great. Well, a lot of people take that to mean an eternal hell, place of eternal torment. But the actual Greek there, eternal means the end of a time period, not for like our word eternity.
So they're still going to be punished for not.
But the punishment is like a purgation, a purification process. Like, you would discipline a child if they did something wrong. They have
jail time. Because you mentioned you go to jail.
Yeah, whatever.
Kind of like a
jail
sentence thingy.
Okay,
and what happens during this jail time?
Okay, so I don't know. I'm not, but the point is, it's not an eternal thing. It is a time where I believe the Bible, and a lot of Christians, well, some anyway, I don't know, I haven't taken a tally, but I know former evangelicals who are realizing and believing in the final redemption, or whatever you say. I'm using words that you don't use. Let me think.
You're fine. I mean, you can use them. I mean, I'm used to using. I grew up in the church. I talk to pastors every week. So
so
as far as that goes, do you think there's
everyone,
because that eternal punishment kind of goes with that?
Here's the thing. The reason we have that phrase is because St. Augustine didn't know Greek. He was reading a bad Latin translation of the Bible. He's the one that came up with this idea, and whenever St. Augustine was, I forget.
So you don't believe
300 or 400 years later,
hell,
I do not believe in an eternal damnation of hell, because to me, a God of love is going to bring all his children home, just to use that phrase. And whatever.
Fine, yeah. So God of love, so I'm going to go home to him, like he wants me to, and I'm going to. Like, explain my situation. Like, what happens in my situation?
Well,
I don't believe that he's a real thing. I don't love him because I don't think he's real. I feel he's more of a character in a story that's kind of made up. So, I mean, what happens to me?
let me, I don't know what's in your heart, but I can see
blood vessels. Clogged arteries, probably.
Metaphorically speaking, tell me about this God you don't believe in, that you think is just
none of them, any of them. Like, name one. I don't believe in that one. I don't believe in this one. I don't believe in Loki. I don't think he's real, but I mean, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to believe and think, or not believe, but think about. And
where do you think everything came from? Do
I
you
have no
believe?
idea. I have no idea. There's
Okay.
so many different answers out there. Everybody seems to have an answer, and
Okay.
I'm
So,
not going to just pick one. I'm going to
okay.
stand with
All
I
right.
don't know. Yeah,
Okay, then then you're in an honest, you're being honest with yourself, and I
I
think that's
try.
very that's no, but that's really powerful. Some
Hmm.
people are just repeating what they've been told and they haven't thought for themselves. You're
Uh,
actually thinking for yourself, and
uh,
everything you've been told doesn't make sense. So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think you're in a place of power when you can be honest and say, "Hey, none of this is a bunch of hooey." I mean, if
yeah,
that's how you feel, you're being
yeah.
honest about that. I think that's
Yeah, I mean,
great.
invisible people are kind of hard to believe in right off the bat. I mean, and then the God of the Bible is really hard to believe in because like what part do you believe in? The parts that I hear
Well,
are pretty
see,
bad. And then
the
I
parts,
talk to people that have
well,
personal relationships with him, but they can't seem to introduce me to this guy. So I don't know. Like, where am I supposed to do with this? What am I supposed to do,
okay.
James?
Uh, Let me go back to this whole thing about the God in the Bible. I
Yeah,
think what we have in the Bible is people's records of what they
right.
thought
Yeah,
God was.
yeah. We've
So,
got that. We're squared on that.
okay,
Me and you
okay,
both.
okay,
We're good
okay,
on that.
fine.
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So, uh, do you want to be if this, let's just pretend, just
Yeah.
for discussion's sake,
Uh-huh.
this God, whoever he is, whatever he,
Your
she,
God
it is,
specifically.
yeah, whatever. Let's just say it does exist.
Uh-huh.
Do you want to be introduced?
I'd love to be introduced to your friend. I love having new friends. If you have a friend that is awesome, like I've been told, this friend is like the best friend you could ever have in your entire life. Well, crap, man. Introduce me to this person. Let's have that conversation. Let me talk to that. Is he there in the room? Can I get his number? Because I mean, prayer isn't really an answer. That's I feel definitely a cop out because nobody talks
Uh,
back to me. It's just the ceiling. So
um,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. How do we do this? How
you,
do we fix this?
it's not going to happen in a few minutes on a
Oh
podcast, maybe.
man, do you
Oh,
have his email
darn, I
maybe?
know. Yeah, I'll send you his email. Uh, you know, have you ever
Hmm.
said that as if he was listening? As
Oh yeah,
if,
several times. I mean, I did the whole prayer in
okay,
my heart several times. I've done the baptisms several times. I grew up in the
all
church,
right,
so I mean,
okay.
I've done everything you can think of, and I've
So,
done it, and
so,
he just refuses to
s-
talk to me. It's weird.
uh, maybe you refuse to listen. I don't know.
Oh
Maybe,
yeah.
maybe he doesn't, maybe you don't need to hear him right now. I don't know.
Mm, mm,
But to me, my wife always jumps on me, says, "Why do you call God He?" Those are words we put
mm.
our words onto what we
All I
call
can do,
God.
man. I'm a human. Yeah, that's all I
I mean,
do.
I
I
know,
like to
I
put
know,
human
I know
words on
totally.
things.
You know, you don't want to speak, some spatial language.
All right. Yeah,
So,
that's all I got, man. I got, yeah.
uh, yeah,
Hmm.
is there anything that is infinite? What does the word
Oh
infinity
man,
mean
that's
to
such
you?
an interesting word. That's a hard one to think about. Now, when I was a kid, now I grew up in Southern California, so Knott's Berry Farm was huge for me. And I remember
Uh-huh.
sitting there thinking, like really thinking, what if there was no Knott's Berry Farm? If God didn't create the world, there'd be no roller coaster for me to ride on. Like it would boggle my mind. So that was just, one of the things I would think about. But then at the end of it, it's like, oh, well, I don't know. You read the stories, and it's back to the original. I don't know. The story in the Genesis doesn't make any sense. So, oh, I love that. Great question. Genesis, as far as the beginning part of the story of your God, how does that begin for you?
Well, actually, there are two stories of creation in the book of Genesis,
Hmm.
two different accounts that
Yeah,
were written at different times.
gotcha.
And I know some of my friends think the Adam and Eve story is totally literal. They were real
Hmm.
people. Like I say, I don't know. I wasn't
Uh,
there. To
uh.
me, it is more of I take it more of as an allegory, a metaphor
Hmm.
for people trying to explain why evil came into the world.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But
Oh, good question.
the two accounts are totally different.
Yeah,
Different order, different name for God,
agree. I
uh,
agree.
all this
Yes.
stuff. And so in the first account, there is no evil.
Hmm.
There's no
Hmm.
possibility
Hmm.
for evil. In the second one, God is the one that creates the opportunity for evil. He allows it.
Interesting way to put that. I like that. There's no opportunity for evil in the original one. Hmm. Yeah, because it's such a
And
shorter version of it. So it's just a cut and dry. So do you
and
believe that God created the world in 7 days, or do you believe he snapped it into existence? How do you think it came into existence?
well, so we're going to get pretty deep here.
Oh, I love
Um,
it.
I don't believe in the literal 7-day,
Hmm,
24-hour period, the way we measure time, creation of the
hmm.
material world.
Okay.
Again, I wasn't there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I wasn't an eyewitness, but the geological evidence to me does not support that. That's what I grew up just thinking because you read it in the Bible. Oh,
Hmm,
well, it's true. But, the more you really allow the scientific discoveries
yeah.
to inform you. But the way I see
Hmm,
I take that first chapter of Genesis really as a metaphor as well. I don't think of it as 7 literal human 24-hour measurement days. I think of it as stages of, here's that word again, spiritual, of, we'll say it this way, of unfoldment of progress.
yes,
And
yes. Like
and the
material
and
things unfolding and progressing into
but I'm going to
planets and
say,
stuff,
what
right?
if what if all those things were just, what if the material world
Hmm.
is really just a metaphor for something in a different realm that we can't see, of something more, well, something non-material.
Okay, hold on. Wait, hold on. Back up
Oh,
this train.
I'm
Okay, I'm trying to follow
okay,
you. I'm gonna try and follow you.
okay,
My brain
okay,
is
okay.
only can
So
only go so fast.
okay. Let me try again. Okay, let's just say in that first chapter of Genesis, where you
Mhm.
have day one, day two, God said after every day and everything, He saw everything He made; it was very good.
So
He
physical,
saw that it was
physically
good.
made it.
Well, you are
Well,
saying physical because that's the way we see things
but was it
with our
physical or was
physical.
it non-seeable?
I Is there anything that's non-seeable in the universe that's real? I think love is, you can't
Uh,
see love.
Black. What was it? What was it? Dark
Can't
energy. Dark energy. We haven't seen
you
that yet. I
can't
don't think. Maybe we see the absence of it. I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead.
can you see honesty? You can see the
I can see it
results
in
of
action.
honesty.
I can see it in action. Yeah, I
Okay,
can see the
okay,
actions of
okay.
these things.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah.
see the result of it,
Like
right?
the wind. Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, so I think there's something behind this physical world that we see. I think this is just the result of something that we can't see,
Hmm. Why do
and
you think that?
well, because something can't come from nothing.
Well, how do you know that?
I think I don't. I just believe it. I guess
Well,
I
we
don't
don't know
know.
that. Yeah, we don't know everything. We just said it. We
Well,
don't know. I wasn't there when the
okay,
universe was created. Yeah.
okay.
Something might have
So
come from nothing. Who the crap knows?
back to this idea of a God, or whether there's a God or not.
Yeah, yeah,
Throughout history, civilizations have, when they haven't understood the cause, and when they see a cause and an effect
hmm.
relationship, they make a God out of the cause.
Well, it doesn't make it right, though.
No, I'm not saying it's right, but
Huh,
the Egyptians did, the ancient Egyptians did that,
huh.
the
Learning.
Vikings
We're
did that,
yeah.
yeah, the
Progress.
Greeks, the Egyptians. You're right,
Yeah.
but no, but my point is, the Native Americans had that,
Yeah, I had
the
imaginary
God of
friends when I
rain.
was a kid, and so now I
Okay,
don't. I'm an
so
adult. We
uh,
progress. We
well,
mature. Yeah.
maybe you should go back to that. Maybe that was
Oh
really
man.
powerful,
Like I have Spider-Man. Does that count? Where's he at?
Uh,
It's on
uh,
here.
my my point is, we make a God out of things that we believe have power or influence or are a cause in our lives,
Yeah.
whether that is a real God or not. But we use
Yeah.
that word that way. So some people's God is the Big Bang. They think that's what the
I've never
primal.
heard anybody call the Big Bang God, though.
Well, they don't think of it, but they think that's what caused the universe to happen. And so
Ooh, that's
I'm
stretching the
saying,
word, though. Maybe. Okay. I don't know.
well,
That's stretching the word.
okay, maybe I'm stretching the word, but I would say,
Uh,
look at the ancient Greeks. They had a god
yeah.
of war, a god of love, a god of
Yeah.
all these things,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they saw that those things had power, and they didn't understand the science behind it.
They
So
didn't understand.
but they personified, and they told
Hmm.
stories to try to teach principles. And so, you know, you really asked some good questions here, because what if we've done that
Hmm.
with the God of the Bible?
Mhm.
And we've just made up our own stories about him. But the
Hmm.
point is
Yeah.
there
Take
some
that further.
validity? Yeah, we could take that for hours. To me, I'm trying to boil the Bible down to what are the lessons that I
Hmm.
can live my life by to be a better person, to help other people.
Hmm.
I go every
But
week
there's
to the
so many
prison
better
to,
books, James. There's so many better books. There's books that
and I
don't say
read,
stone gay people or, talk about hellfire and
okay,
shenanigans. You
but
know?
see, I think the way I read that book
Hmm.
is that when I see something that doesn't go along with the way Jesus portrayed God,
Hmm.
I think that was just somebody's misconception. And like, who am I to pass the final judgment? I'm not. I'm trying to do the
Hmm.
best I can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I read a
Yeah.
lot of other books too.
Good,
I
good.
read a
It's a
I
good
read a
thing.
lot of books, because I learn from people who completely disagree with me. I'm
Hmm.
learning stuff from you because when you just talk to people you agree with, you don't learn anything. You
It's
just
so true. So
patting
true.
yourself on the back. I love people to stretch me. I love people to I mean, I don't like the debate process, but I like the sharing of ideas because that's how we learn. That's
Back and
how
forth
we
conversation. Exactly.
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
you realize, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that'll make sense." Well, I know what I mean, but if you can't explain it to somebody else, you
There it
need to
is.
think about it a little deeper.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's good.
And figure out where you're at, and then you can explain it better later on. Love it.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Thank
But
you.
to me
This
it
has
all
been
boils
great.
it all boils down to me is how can I love someone the way I would want to be loved?
No, that's good. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. I love it. I love it. It's when the God guy comes in and it's like, why? Why is he needed the spiritual part? We don't need that. We were doing so well. We were just loving each other. And it seems to me that you are convinced by evidence. I've heard a lot of things from you that were like, wow, okay, so he is convinced by evidence as far as biblically and whatnot. So I'm very curious. What has convinced you that this Jesus character, the Yahweh character, or whoever it is real and I guess, yeah, it's just real that they're actually the ones that did all this or interacting with the world. What is
Well,
it?
when I can take the teachings and put them into practice
Hmm,
and I get the results that seems to indicate I will get. Um,
hmm.
I'll give you an example.
But I can do that with a lot of leaders that
Oh,
are,
oh,
the
oh,
same thing.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
But I don't
Uh,
think they're gods.
I'm just fine.
Yeah.
We're talking about how we're dealing with our thinking. And if I use what I call God to do that to help me, good
Hmm.
for me. If you do it another way, good for you.
But why
I'm
God
not,
though? Why? Why did you
why
choose
not?
God to do it with?
Because I have found that sense of God being this infinite. Think back to this word infinite. To me,
Mhm.
God is infinite love, fills the whole universe more than we can even imagine.
Hmm.
Now, do I completely understand that?
Sounds
No.
nice,
It
but
sounds nice, doesn't
yeah, but
it?
I don't see a universe full of love though. That's
Okay.
part
So
of the problem, I guess.
maybe you're looking through a wall of glass bricks and it's very distorted.
Well, I mean, I've watched the
Or
history of this world, and I'm
I know
witnessing the history of this world as is
wow,
now. So,
I agree.
yeah.
Where's the love there? I agree.
Wait, show me the love.
Show me the love. That's right. I love it. Uh, I I'm trying to take the love that I feel from
Hmm,
God and let that light shine out in whatever way I can to share that love with other people.
hmm,
That's why I go to the prison every week, and I'm not trying to convince them of anything. I'm just
hmm,
saying, let's talk about this. What's bothering? What are your challenges? How can learning to love solve those problems? I've had people tell me that their lives have been transformed because they
yeah,
feel loved, they feel respected. I'm not forcing anything on them. I'm not telling them they have to believe on God. We're just using that as a framework to talk about the
hmm.
idea of what does it mean to love? What does it mean to forgive? What does it mean to, uh, you know, be
Forgive, yeah, yeah.
unselfish?
So, do you think God has a part in that? He's actually going in there, softening hearts, or changing minds, or how's that work for you?
I'm not quite sure I understand
When they
where
start
you're
to
coming.
feel the love of God. when you go in there and you talk to these prisoners and they feel the love of God, what's happening? Is it just your words, or is it God interacting in the real world, changing or sending that love? How does that work?
I can't say what happens in someone else's heart. I don't know. I can't, again, it's not something you can see with your physical eyeballs.
Yeah.
Um, but you can see the result of them
Hmm.
feeling something that's, I mean, I can
I feel
say those
accepted,
words.
maybe.
Yeah, I can say those words. It's not the words. Let me give you another example. That this was very powerful to me. And again, you may say, "Oh well, you didn't need God for it, whatever." But this is
Well, if we're
this.
starting off that way, I don't know.
Yeah, hey, whatever. I'm glad we
Go
can
ahead, go ahead.
have a light heart here.
Yeah.
Um, I was living in Boston at the time, and I had my little prayer time in the morning, and I realized that I was afraid to love as much as I perceived that Jesus loved, because, well, look what they did to him. He was this
Hmm.
good guy trying to help people, and they strung him up. I thought,
Supposedly. Go ahead. Yeah,
well, supposedly, okay,
yeah.
just taking it at face value. So I said in my little prayer that I refuse to be afraid to love as much as Jesus did, just for today.
Hmm.
So I had to run out for an errand, and I went down my street, crossed the street, walking down to get something at a little near neighborhood store. And this guy who was, well, he didn't say he was homeless, but he smelled like he'd been sleeping in the sewer. It was
Hmm.
a hot summer morning. He had on a heavy wool coat that was thick with crud
Stuff. Yeah, yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Hmm.
His hair was a mess. He was just,
Poor
and he
guy.
came right up to he came right up to me and said, "I need a couple of dollars for a drink." This was like in the late 70s, early 80s. You could actually
Mhm.
get something for a couple of bucks. Anyway, I felt
Uh,
so much love for this man. Usually
hmm.
I would have looked the other way, or uh anyway, I said, "You don't need a drink. You just need to feel loved."
Hmm.
And he started crying.
Yeah, that's a natural.
And
Yeah.
I put my arm around him. I mean,
Hmm.
I couldn't believe, later I think I couldn't help myself. My
Yeah.
arm just went around him. It's like I
Yeah.
didn't even do it. I put my arm around
Moments,
him,
man. Good
and
job.
he was just bawling like a baby. And so we went and sat down. This is Boston, so there are these these stoops that are like a whole flight of stairs on the outside of a townhouse.
Yeah,
So we
yeah.
went and sat on one of those. We talked for like 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. This guy had been a deacon in his church, and he'd done something really bad, and his friends
Hmm.
and his family and his church all said, "God will never forgive you." Uh, you know, they totally ostracized him. He was living with this shame and burden and guilt. And
Hmm.
I said to him, "God forgive you right now." He
Hmm.
obviously, uh, whatever, I don't even know totally what it was, but
Yeah.
he felt completely different. The more we talked, he said, "You know what? I don't really want that drink anymore." And I was not talking to him like, "Oh, the power of God." I was just loving on him like I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah.
Uh,
Showing
and
compassion to the man. I'm sure
I
he
was
hasn't
showing
got much of it.
compassion,
Yeah.
and he hadn't.
Yeah.
And then when he stood up, uh, he said, "You know what? My stomach was all full of cramps. I feel perfect. I feel great now."
Hmm.
And
Lot
I
less
got his
stress.
name,
Yeah.
and I got, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
See, I think the way we feel is related to the way we think. And if you're
Yes.
stressed
Well,
out,
sometimes. Yeah.
when you feel loved, and it can just be human love, I felt like there was something more than that, because this guy
Hmm.
lived out in Roxbury,
Hmm.
and he said, "I never come into the city like at this time of day." And
Hmm.
I said, "Well, that's funny, because I'm never out at this time of day. It was my day off, and I would have
Hmm.
been inside until later. And if I had been, I don't know,
Hmm.
30 seconds sooner or late, if I had been 30 seconds sooner or a minute and a half later, I would have missed him totally."
Oh yeah. Circumstantial, man. I got a ton of those
And
stories in my life. 100%.
so
Yeah.
you call them circumstantial, but what if they're divine circumstances?
Well, I
You
think you can do a
know,
better job at warning people, like we said, the children. I'm curious about the forgiveness, though. You keep mentioning forgiveness. How
yeah.
does God forgive? Like,
Um,
cause I'm gonna
it's
the
okay.
bloodshed.
This
Hebrews
okay.
9:22. Without the shedding of blood,
Okay.
there is no forgiveness. That's in the New Testament. So, how do you feel that God forgives?
I always go back to what Jesus says. I take what Jesus says as priority over the way people interpret what Jesus says.
Hmm.
Jesus said in what we call the Sermon on the Mount,
Yeah, yeah.
Matthew chapter 6, if you don't forgive others, God won't forgive you. He
Hmm.
forgave people before he was crucified on the cross. I don't believe it's his literal blood that forgives you.
Gotcha,
I don't,
gotcha.
because it is that the crucifixion to me is a
Hmm.
whole different situation. Because even Paul says, if some people are saying that there's no resurrection, if Jesus wasn't resurrected, then you're still in your sins. So it's not just the blood of Jesus,
Hmm.
it's the fact that Jesus was victorious over death. He conquered it. He didn't succumb to it and not conquer it. He overcame death.
Hmm.
Again, you may think that's just a
Now, help me
story that people
understand that. I
tell.
mean, it's
Okay, well,
because what I
okay,
understand is like Hebrews 9:22. Without the shedding of blood,
you're
there is no
talking about.
forgiveness.
I understand, and that
So,
was the big thing in the Old Testament. There had
right,
to be a
yeah,
ram or a lamb or
yeah,
a
yeah.
goat or a pig or
Something
whatever,
innocent had to die in order for God to
and
forgive
which
people.
doesn't make sense.
So then why did
Uh,
Jesus have to die to begin with? If he
okay,
doesn't need the blood, if he doesn't need that blood to forgive people, so why did he
I,
need to die?
I, the more I've read the New Testament, and I'm not the ultimate Bible
Me
scholar,
neither.
so
Me neither. Well,
the
that's
thing,
fine.
yeah. So I'm sharing the way when I try to read
Yes.
and get an overview of what it's really saying is when Paul is talking, or Hebrews is talking about the blood, it's referring to the crucifixion.
Mhm.
If Jesus, okay, one role Jesus had was as a teacher. If
Okay.
you have let's say you have a calculus teacher and they can only go so far in working out the problems, but the ultimate calculus uh, equation they can't solve.
Yeah. We need Stephen
Would you want
Hawking's
to take?
for it or something, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, would you want to take a calculus class from them? Would you think that they were a qualified person to teach calculus?
Yes. At least they can get me started.
Okay, they can get you
They may not
started,
know
but
the
they couldn't.
ultimate question, but they can get me
Okay,
going.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
so based on the assumption of if Jesus was a teacher and he was teaching people that life is eternal,
Uh-huh.
which is one of the things he talked about, he couldn't just say those words.
Hmm.
He had to actually
Why?
work that out as an equation. He actually proved it in a sense when he submitted to death and then came back from the grave.
Well, he was the son of
He
God.
was
He has little special
he was
abilities
the
there. I
son
mean,
of
it's
God.
different.
Well, but he
How is
raised
that proven
again.
everybody can do it, though?
Well, that's the implication. He wants us to back to following him. He said
Oh.
the things that I
Uh,
do, you can do also. That's a
So
whole nother thing to
we
talk.
can heal all the sick. We can do all that shenanigans as
You know
well.
what? I have had some pretty interesting healings, which you would call
I've
probably circumstantial.
Yeah, because I've
But
yet to see any faith healer go to a children's hospital, James. That's my thing.
well,
If you can go to a
the
children's hospital and cure like a bunch of kids, then I might believe that you have superpowers. Other than that, it's just kind of, I don't know,
the interesting thing is
circumstantial.
Jesus went to people. Jesus went to people who were receptive of message. When he went to his hometown, nobody
Hmm.
listened to him, and he didn't heal anybody there much.
Well, that wasn't very nice of him.
I,
I mean, if you're not going to
well,
listen to me, I'm not going to heal your kid. That's not very loving. That's not like the most powerful
no,
love I've ever felt in my life.
well,
That's
let me tell you,
selfish.
let me,
Love me or I'm
uh,
not going to heal your kid.
no, no, that's not it at all.
Oh, that's what it sounds like.
Would you give a 3-year-old a full size power what like a
I don't know.
what do they call them, a chainsaw?
Chainsaw?
No,
Well, he couldn't even
they're
hold
not
it.
they're
Like,
not
what's the
ready.
point?
Okay, yeah, they're not ready for it. If you're going to give a 3-year-old a saw, you give them a little plastic saw, a little
Right, but
plastic
how's
camera.
that correlate? How's that
Okay,
correlate?
listen to me. They're not ready. They're not ready. I hear your
I love
question,
it. I love
Michael.
it. I love it. James, you're so much fun.
They're they're not ready. They're not mature enough to have the real McCoy, right? Because you
So
give
what's
them a
the real
plate.
McCoy? What's the thing that
Okay,
we're not ready for?
okay. So back to this question of why Jesus didn't heal those people in his
Right.
hometown. If
What we're not
somebody
ready for.
wasn't, they weren't ready to accept that he was anybody. All they could see was this is a carpenter's son. We knew him when he was a little
Oh man.
teenager.
Yeah.
They saw him. They didn't see him as capable.
I don't see him trying hard enough, apparently. I mean, he's the all-knowing God
Well,
son. He should know what will
you
convince
were
the town, right?
you were there, so you saw it happen. So that's
I'm
how
just
you
saying they
know
didn't
that.
convince the town, so he must not have tried very hard. He convinced other towns. Well, his hometown, he couldn't convince. Jesus couldn't convince his hometown that he was magical or whatever, you know.
He didn't try to force himself on anybody.
Well, that's not what I see a lot of, but that's okay. Um, James, we've overexhausted our hour, but this has
We
been a
have.
blast, and I really want to know more about forgiveness. You've taught me so much about what you believe, and I love it. It's very fascinating. So I'd love to continue this for another time, but we're out of time here. Go ahead and plug your stuff anywhere we can find you, and any closing comments, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Um, I really appreciate this conversation. I don't get this kind of conversation very often, so it's
Hmm.
kind of fun to have
Good.
this. I call it a dance, or uh,
Yes. Are you the one that sent
but
me the dance message?
yeah, I
Yeah.
was out. That's I
Yes.
mean,
I love that message. Where'd you learn how to dance? It's like, I don't know. I just kind of taught myself how to dance there.
yeah, it's kind
That
of
was good. That was good. Go ahead.
freeform
Sorry.
dance. So, um, to any of your listeners who would like to continue the conversation with me about any of this kind of stuff Michael and I have talked about, I've got a special page on my website I've created just for his listeners. So if you go to thebiblespeakstoyou.com/what, and that what comes from the part of the title of
Hmm.
Michael's podcast, The Bible Says What. And I've got some resources there. If you're interested in my podcast, which is all about getting back to the original message of Jesus and kind of exploring and embracing his mindset, there's a place to sign up for my podcast. And I put a collection of previous podcasts together about um, finding your spiritual purpose, your spiritual identity. So if that's of interest to you, and then also I have an offer for you. As I said earlier, I do something I call it Jesus Mindset Coaching, and if this is your deal, and it may not be, but if it is, if you'd like to learn to think more like Jesus did, this kind of unconditional love we were talking about, there's a place where you can sign up for a free 1 hour session, and we'll actually talk about that and then see if that's something you'd like to pursue. If not, that's fine. It's just my opportunity to share some ideas with you and hear where you are and see if you're interested in taking it any further. So again, go to thebiblespeakstoyou.com/what. And as far as closing remarks,
Hmm.
wow, Michael, I would like to talk more because I love your heart. I love your honesty with where you are. You ask absolutely great questions. And I would just say to everyone listening, in the spirit of that, whether you are a Bible reader or a Bible not reader, keep your sense of curiosity
Hmm.
and
Preach it,
be willing
James.
to, if you believe all the things in the Bible, ask yourself why. If you don't believe them, ask yourself why.
Hmm.
I think wherever we are, we need that sense of I was going to say spiritual,
Oh.
but I'll just leave the word spiritual off. I think we need that sense of curiosity as to why. I think it's important to ask those questions, and keep searching for answers and
Hmm.
read other books, read other things, see what works for you. And if you're thinking, hey, what if this Jesus guy is real? I would say read Matthew chapters 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on
Hmm.
the Mount, and actually try to do the things he says in there, like love your enemies. You practice that for a week.
Yeah.
You're going to be, that changes me anyway. It makes me a better person. So
Awesome.
that's what I leave you with. Keep your curiosity up.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And we'll keep in touch, man.
All right.
That's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. As always, you can find all things BSW related on the show's website at thebiblesayswhat.com. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to thebiblesayswhat.com and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will get you early access to each new episode on Wednesdays instead of Sundays. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcasts, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly share and review the show? Next time on The Bible Says What?
I come in and I'm like, look, God, I don't like how that felt. What's up with that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
That's
no,
the
I
kind
mean,
of
I would throw
conversation
that
I
back
have.
in his face, the whole force and never leave me, never forsaken thing. You're supposed to be my best
Yeah.
friend, my protector.
There,
What the crap,
there you
dude?
go.
Like, how can we be friends at
There
this
you
point?
go.